Move on our seminar. Our next speaker comes from United States. He has thrown a javelin, as you may guess. The old model record is 94.06. And he will, Mr. Duncan Attwood, and he will talk about the flight parameters of Javelin. Duncan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you could put it on.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. It's just so good to be here in Javelin heaven and with so many Javelin friends. It's a wonderful privilege for me. Well, let's talk a little bit about flight. And I was very happy to listen to Dr. Lehman's presentation to talk and hear him confirm technically what a lot of I've been finding out is on a more subjective level, that it really makes a difference when you throw the javelin very well through the point. Whoops. We have biomechanics efforts that we make in the United States. I worked with USA Track and Field for about 10 years doing the filming, and we ended up finding out that pardon me, a lot of athletes were not really seeing that with the new rules javelin, they were experiencing a self-correction. They were going under the javelin a little bit, then it would correct, and it would look fine to them, and the coach maybe wouldn't notice. So what the numbers ended up showing was that there's as much of a loss of almost 5 meters can be with some of the higher level performances. We're all friends in the javelin world, excuse me, but I know when I was throwing, I did not want to give 5 meters to anybody else. I wanted to keep all of the meters for myself. You guys the athletes work very hard for every little bit of release velocity that you can get, and you want to get the most out of it. So when the javelin comes down like this, then corrects, it even can go past that, so you get this fishtail thing like this. It's hard to pick up when it's subtle, but when you have an angle of attack that's higher than about 4 or 5 degrees, you really pay the price. And when I was first experiencing, frankly, the horrible switch from the old rules javelin to the new rules javelin, we said the new rules javelin was like throwing a shovel. I ended up learning that a little negative angle of attack was good, -3. Mr. Dick Held was a friend of mine for a long time, and he told me that was a good thing to do, so I kept doing it. He told me it delayed the pitch over like this. So I'm delighted to see that when the javelin is thrown with a little bit negative or perfectly straight, we get the better results than with the high angle of attack that we used to. I'm not going to go over, I will go over a little bit angle of attack again, but mostly we'll just have a look at some of the flights here and see what we can see. So this throw makes a pretty good flight, at least that's how it looks from the side. We don't have 3-dimensional cameras to do the really high quality stuff, but this looks pretty good. It did not delay too much in the beginning. The rest of the flight is not really very informative. You can see by the angle it hits that it's not too bad. This fellow, well, he does a little stall. Actually, this is a huge stall. This is easy to see. This is not really our problem because everyone can see this. Everyone can see this. You don't have to be a biomechanics expert to tell that that's a problem. And that, of course, is with a high positive angle of attack. This fellow, hard to see it, but he does throw with a negative angle of attack, too much of a negative angle. You can just see it here. Raises the tail too much. That's not very efficient either. So we're trying to get the most out of your hard-earned release velocity, and getting right through the point is the way to do it. On this last throw, this is hard to see, but it looks almost right. But that's our problem. It might be right, it might not be right. And this guy might have lost a couple of meters. These distances are not very big, but it still can be seen that sometimes they make small mistakes and they don't realize it. Okay, so here's the Javelin here, and this is just some phases of the Javelin flight. The release phase is like this. Then we get more lift in the beginning, gliding phase, gliding. We hope it glides a long time, but then it starts to turn over, and there it lands. Okay, so we did talk a little bit about angle of attack being the difference between where the javelin is pointed and where the handle is being thrown is one way to think about it. Yaw and side slip, these are parameters that are very hard for me to communicate to my athletes, and I hear a lot of talk from coaches and athletes. They get a lot of it mixed up. Even angle of attack confuses a lot of people. They say, well, they're holding their javelin like this. They say, I'm going to lower my angle of attack, and they just lower it like so, and they don't realize that they're really talking about inclination instead of attack. So the terms are difficult. I found it's been a challenge for a lot of people to understand it. And we'll just go over this again. So we have some very different angles here. This is Bro Greer on the right, throwing 82 meters. So this multi-event guy, 54 or 53, Bro's down at 34. Release angle is 37. Oh, look at this. Bro has a negative angle here. Okay. This guy has a huge attack angle. It just kills him. Negative 3.9. Okay. So one quick comment about Bro. Everybody here knows that this is probably not the best point of technique. He plunges forward significantly. There's a whole bunch of problems if you're going to look at it from a classic point of view of technique. But one of the things Bro had several things that made him throw far, and one of the things was he knew how to fly the javelin. And he was such a good athlete that even though he's getting pulled to the ground by 700 kilos of force, he could still make the javelin fly. And that helped him out a lot. Right before he threw his American record of 91 meters, which I'll show you in a little while, a friend of mine said he was watching him warm up, and Dr. Lehman spoke about adding lift to the throw. Bro was seen to throw 25 to 30 meters directly up. He's practicing throwing directly up in the air, bumping the javelin very high. It was not something anyone had seen before. This was unique. So it turns out that what Bro has learned to do is, although he's going forward terribly, he makes this huge bump, and it comes out just right. Now, if you have an athlete like that, then you don't really have to worry about any of this stuff because they'll figure it out. But that's a little bit of an explanation of what's going on with this arrangement here. So despite the fact that he's going forward, beautiful flight of the javelin, he throws 82 meters on this throw. Okay, here's just another set of indicators of the angles there. Okay, this is just for fun, but it's interesting to see. It's the Javelin gun that the Gill company has, and what you don't hear are the shouts of the onlookers as this thing just blasts these javelins 100 meters, 150 meters, 180 meters. It's something to see. Boom, here it just goes, takes off, it's gone, you can't even see it. So to call Andreas a javelin gun, I think is pretty good. So here's a slow piece coming out. One of the disadvantages of this device is that they can't put in an angle of attack in their tests, and so all the throws are, they should name this thing Andreas, actually. They are all perfect right through the point, and so, but they need to get some information. They need to make javelins that will fly with these angles of attack. So this one I tried to get back to film, and I think there was a UFO sighting that day because it's way up there. It was just this enormous, enormous thing. Fun to see. So the technique for throwing the javelin far, one of my favorite throwers ever, Tom Puxtis. Look how this is held perfectly steady, perfectly steady, perfectly steady. This is in Kienbaum. And Kara, on the other hand, and he does a linear throw, and Kara Patterson rotates down under the throw. One of these throws is 49 meters, and one is 63. Can you figure out which one is which? They're both very, very similar, but she has an enormous angle of attack on one of them, and it only goes 49. So here were some of her attack angles for that year. Huge, she's losing a lot. In this one also, we can just see the difference between a more linear arm path, and here, this gal's trunk path comes down like this and makes her go under the javelin. So it's one thing to know that you have to fly the javelin far. You have to move your body so that you can actually throw it in a very straight line. And I think that gets lost. I know a lot of Americans throw baseballs. Those are round. You can make an arc instead of a linear path, and that causes a lot of problems. You can make an arc and release it at the top of the arc, and the ball will travel straight, even though it's tumbling. That's not evident. But with a javelin, you can't make it tumble. So you have to practice this. So here's Bro's 91-meter American record throw. Comes in pretty fast and ends up crumpling rather low. But one of the things that he does here is he gets his elbow close to the javelin shaft. And that's one other thing that I see often happens with nicely aligned throws, is that the elbow, a little familiar film here maybe, the elbow comes very close to the javelin shaft, right about here. Okay. We don't see this in all the top throws, certainly, but we do see that in beautifully aligned throws sometimes. So, and the illustration of Bro is to make the point that you can have some pretty crazy form and still get the javelin to fly. You can get some pretty far throws. So I really encourage people to consider how their technique is being done, and is that allowing them, apart from, there's this mysterious kind of having a touch on the javelin, having a feel for the javelin. Well, if the fundamental technique is pulling a person under the throw, it's going to be, you have to be as good of an athlete as Bro, and that's real difficult, to still get a good flight. So what do we do about this? How do you learn to fly the javelin well? In my era, we had the old rules javelin, and that told you and anyone who was watching that when you if you missed it, everybody saw that you missed it. It was very obvious. And most of the throwers I knew way back in the day, a lot of them, even if they couldn't throw very far, they could throw the javelin through the point fairly well because they had a javelin that told them, oh, you made a mistake on that one. Oh, you got that one pretty well. Look, there it goes. So that was a big point. Now when we have these new javelins that self-correct a little bit, they make the throw, they turn the head to the side, the javelin goes under, they look up and it's corrected and it looks right. And that's been a problem. So one of the things you can do, you can make javelins out of bamboo. And especially if you're training, I'm going to talk to you mostly about not training 90-meter throwers. I don't work with any 90-meter throwers. I don't know if all of you do, but you probably also work with beginners. I think it's very important for beginners to learn with old rules javelins, and maybe this is the secret that Frank is saving for us for tomorrow. I also know that I've heard, anyway, I don't know it, but I've heard that Jan Zelezny did throw old rules javelins when he was young, and that taught him to throw some of his beautiful throws like this. But if you can't find any, well, we'll talk about that in a second. You can make bamboo javelins. First, you have to buy bamboo, you have to get your tools, you have to get the parts, but some people are pretty handy with this. It's not that bad. It can be very cheap. You can balance it. You mark them where the balance is. You put the tips on. I don't know if people really want to do this, but I put a javelin next to it to find out where to put the handle. Make the tape. Wear gloves because you can get a splinter. And then with any luck, you can end up with something that flies like this for only, I think this one cost about $3. And it's nice to have a bundle of them. They do get wet and absorb water sometimes. The difficulty is to try to find them, is to try to make them consistent and try to even get a source for bamboo. Now, I live in Seattle, Washington, and Japan is over there and China's over there. So we can get bamboo sometimes until the bamboo importer goes out of business or something like that. So this has been a problem to actually get the source material. And then they do end up, each one has a little personality. They're not the same. But that can be good for your young throwers to get them to learn flight, is that, oh, this is the one that goes down, so I will try to make it go up a little more. This is the one that goes up, I will try to make it go down a little more. Sometimes the variation is a good thing. Flight training javelin. You people have seen this plastic javelin here. I had an interesting time training this guy for a year. He had a very bad elbow. At 450 grams, we would throw this quite a bit, 10 times, and then switch to throw the 800-gram javelin. Here you can see you can have a pretty significant bend in the javelin in this one. It teaches you alignment, but this is actually Dave Johnson, the bronze medalist in the decathlon in the 90s, and this is his first time throwing at age 50, in 6 years or something like that when he was doing this. His comment was, "I'm sure glad that was a softer javelin because this throw would have hurt my elbow if I had taken it with an 800. But the point is that when you are training for flight, you're going to miss the javelin sometimes. And if you're throwing something like a bamboo javelin or one of these lighter flight training javelins, you can take many throws and learn where you're actually trying to throw at little cost to your arm, which is important. So this one, he hooked over to the left. Later in the day, he actually got a really nice throw. Now here, this is an advantage here of getting a safety javelin. This is a welt on this kid's back. He whipped himself in the back with this thing, and it's good that he was throwing a plastic javelin instead of a real javelin. Then I have a problem because I have to coach people like this. And they're very nice, but I don't think I could present Dr. Lehman's information to them and have it come into their brains. So instead, we use this training javelin, and even one of them can see the difference between this throw here, that she throws it way too high, this one's better. She can see this difference and make her own corrections without having me try to tell her. Or the coaching becomes quite simple, actually. On this next clip here, you'll see that this one curves. And I was able to tell her when she threw this one, just throw the next one straighter. And she was able to do it that time. Not always. Okay. So more of this is learning how to fly it. You want to be able to see what's going on. Also, throwing into a wind makes a big difference, especially with the lighter javelins. Let's see how we're doing here, what the next one is. Kara Patterson here takes her javelins skiing. I don't quite know what she's doing with them, but people end up liking them. Here they are in Cameroon with some javelins, and it's a good thing to have. It seems to travel well, and people seem to like it. but it's not the only solution. You can also use old rules javelins if you can find them. I had a coach who was not a javelin specialist tell me, hey, I'm going to get rid of some of these old rule javelins. Do you want them? Well, yes. And so I took them, and especially for men, throwing the 600 gram, the women's old rules javelins is a very good thing. So if you can get your hands on them, just offer to trade one new javelin for 2 or 3 or 4 of somebody's old javelins, and you will get a good deal. You can get the handle rebuilt, and maybe the balance point made right. Really makes a big difference. Make sure, now I hope that most of you will know about the rating system of the old rules javelins. If you have a thrower who is throwing, a male thrower, he's throwing 65 to 70 meters or something like that, and you give him a 90-meter old rules javelin, that will not work. It will fall out of the air. So you have to get the ratings on the old rules javelins really make a big difference. So it's a great way to go. They like to throw a real javelin. So for the old rules javelin, you need old people. So that's me over here, and this is Tom Petronov. You can see the different angles that we each throw at. These are both 90-meter throws. Mine goes very high. His is much lower. He had a much steeper angle of attack on his, and that's one issue with throwing an old rules javelin, is that if you throw it with a positive maybe 5 or 8 degrees, which is what Tom threw there, you can get it to glide and glide and glide, and it's not as good of a learning experience, it possibly at a higher level. I was throwing very old rules javelins because I'm sort of old, but I tried to throw right through the point instead of this throwing under a little bit, and you can still get good throws that way. These are actually the identical implement. That was all we had to throw that day. So throwing into the wind is important. Throwing easy is important, and a lot of people don't do that. Oh yes, the flight line. This is very important to discuss. This is a wedge of cheese to indicate the direction of the flight line. Very important to think about. We put up a hula hoop and have people throw through the hula hoop. It's a thing to do. Doesn't work perfectly, but we did notice one time at this camp that I go to, kids who had no idea where they were throwing. Because in this field, you can see there is no target at the other end, which really helps a lot. So we had to make this thing. Another thing you can do that I think is quite valuable is to put a laser pointer, see if this is going to work. There we go. You put a laser pointer on the javelin like this, and if you do some running with it, you can see where it's pointing. Kids seem to like it. They will point it at each other, so tell them not to do that. But when they do much running with it like this, it helps develop their awareness, the spatial awareness of where they're going to throw. So we've had some fun with this. You can make any arrangement you want. It doesn't matter. And it seems to work pretty well. Just another little hint. So I've gotten some good results with simple, easy, gradual throwing, where really in the beginning of the workout, just throwing it for flight line. And then this is a good trick to do. You've probably already done this. You throw one under, you throw one over. It doesn't always happen this way, but the next one, right through the point. I've gotten a lot of good results getting kids to, they try to always throw perfectly, and they go under every time. Well, over-exaggerate, throw over on a few, then maybe you can find the middle. Here we are doing something I saw at the Kehas Carnavalet in Pitapudas, throwing the javelin at the hat, stuck there. My friend Tom Puxtis, who I mentioned earlier, came over. We had been throwing for half an hour, and 16-year-old boys were throwing at this, and one guy got this close. They were going to get an ice cream cone if they hit the hat. maybe 20 minutes of throwing, nobody did very well. Tom comes over, first throw, boom, hits the hat. That guy knew where the line was. He knew where the line was and he knew how to put something on the line. It's a skill. If you practice it diligently with that in mind, you can learn how to make the javelin go just about where you want. This gal here is not in practice. She misses it. She's way off to the side. So that's what I know. Thank you very much for watching. And we'll stop this. I want to ask for any questions and clarifications. I think I covered most of what I want to know. Many of you already know how to work with your athletes on this. My main emphasis is to get you to keep doing that good work and make sure that even if you are throwing your regular javelins, watch carefully, use video. Although it's possible to make mistakes with your filming, you may not have such an elaborate, perfect system to get perfect results, but do try to do some filming and make sure you understand whether or not you're getting good flights. Okay, so that's what I know. Thank you so much, and ready for questions if we have any.